My parents told me they couldn't afford to help with my college tuition, then paid for my sister's prestigious university education for her future. So I quietly took a scholarship offer and left without a word. 4 years later, I walked into my graduation in a cap and gown right as my dad was begging the dean for my location. The day they told me they couldn't help pay for college, my dad cried like it hurt him more than it hurt me. That was the moment I knew things weren't just tight financially. Things were different for me than they were for her. And by her, I mean Kylie, my little sister by 2 years and the eternal golden child. I sat at the kitchen table, FAFSA form half filled, hoping maybe they'd say, "We can't do much, but we'll try." Instead, my mom stared at her hands like they owed her money, and my dad clutched his chest like I'd just asked them to sell the house. "Sweetheart," he said, drawing the word out like a violin note meant to soften the blow. "It's just not possible right now." He started crying, telling me how proud they were, how they wished they could do more, how maybe I could work part-time and take a few classes locally. "You're so smart," he said. "You'll figure it out." Mom nodded like that was all I needed, her quiet blessing to figure out how the hell I was going to fund 4 years of tuition, books, housing, and food on my own. I didn't cry. Not then. I just said thanks and folded the form, slipping it into my folder like it was a receipt I'd never need again. I went upstairs, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed with that sinking feeling you get when you realize you've been stupidly hopeful for too long. I knew things had always been off, just a little bit. Kylie never had curfews. Kylie got away with C's and forgotten homework and broken windows. Kylie's mistakes were just girls being girls. My mistakes were disappointments and how could yous and we expected more from you. But I never thought the gap between us was thousands of dollars wide. A week later, I heard it. The excited shrieks coming from downstairs. I peeked out my bedroom door, heart catching in my throat, thinking maybe someone had won the lottery. But it was Kylie dancing around the living room, waving an acceptance letter from Westfield University, one of the most prestigious and expensive private universities in the country. She was shouting, "I got in! I got in!" and jumping up and down like a kid on Christmas morning. My dad ran over barefoot, giggling, like it was the first good thing that had happened to him in years. "Oh my God, Kylie," he squealed. "It's perfect. She needs the best education possible," he said later over dinner, like that made it logical. "She's going to make connections that will set her up for life." My mom added that investing in a prestigious degree is an investment in her future. They toasted her with sweet tea like she'd already graduated from Harvard. I just sat there, chewing dried chicken and thinking, you couldn't even co-sign a student loan for me. They didn't ask why I wasn't excited. They didn't ask how my financial aid forms were going. It was like the whole conversation we'd had in that kitchen the week before had just evaporated. Like my college dream had been a passing phase, like a temporary fever that burned out before spring. That night, I sat in the garage with my laptop open and read the email again, just to make sure it was real. "Congratulations. You've been selected for the Eastern Men in STEM full tuition scholarship." It was real. It was mine. And I hadn't told them. I could have. Maybe I should have. But there was a kind of power in keeping it to myself. They had no idea I'd already figured it out. They thought they had shut a door and that I'd just stand there on the porch, confused and grateful for the scraps. Instead, I was already planning my move quietly, without drama, without begging, without giving them the satisfaction of being needed. The school was 3 states away. I'd have housing covered, meals paid for, books included. All I had to do was show up and work my ass off, which, ironically, was something I already knew how to do. I remember packing one box at a time, starting with my notebooks, then my clothes, then the few personal things that actually mattered. A photo of me and my grandpa, a journal, a tiny cactus I hadn't yet killed. I didn't touch the family picture on my nightstand, not out of spite. It just didn't feel like mine anymore. That last morning, I didn't say goodbye. I left a post-it on the fridge that said, "Don't wait up." It wasn't cruel, just neutral. I didn't slam the door. I didn't blast music. I slid into a rideshare car at 6 in the morning with everything I owned in 2 suitcases, and I never looked back. Not that day anyway. But I'll tell you what stuck with me, the image that branded itself onto my memory like a scar. My sister dancing around the living room with that acceptance packet clutched to her chest like a precious trophy. My mom writing out a check for the enrollment deposit without hesitation. My dad taking a photo and saying, "Now this is what it means to grow up." I didn't cry when they said they couldn't help. I didn't cry when Kylie got her full ride to Westfield. But that picture? That phrase? That's what broke me. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't part of their future plan. And maybe I never had been. So I made my own. And I made damn sure it didn't include them. Not yet. Not until the day they'd come crawling back, wondering where I'd gone and why I'd disappeared. Wondering how they missed the signs. Because I promised myself something right then as I watched them celebrate her while forgetting me completely. I promised I'd come back someday, but not to be found. No. To be seen. There's a particular kind of silence that settles in a house after betrayal, and it's not loud or dramatic. It's almost peaceful, like the air itself knows better than to stir the dust while your heart reconfigures its entire definition of love. I spent the next few days drifting around the house like a ghost no one had noticed had died, floating from room to room while everyone else went about their lives like nothing had happened. Kylie had her future secured now, her prestigious university acceptance packet displayed proudly on the refrigerator, her dorm shopping list growing by the day, her social media buzzing with congratulations, and my parents had what they apparently wanted most, a daughter with elite education prospects and a son quiet enough to disappear behind a closed bedroom door. I watched from the kitchen window the first time her acceptance package arrived with Westfield University emblazoned across the top, tuition bill inside showing a staggering $68,000 per year, all marked paid with my parents' account information. She danced through the house with it, the premium cardstock paper with gold embossing shimmering under the lights like she was sending a signal out into the world that she was coming, so they better move. My dad watched her like she was shipping off to change the world, not heading to an overpriced university to burn through money she hadn't earned. Mom leaned on the counter saying something like, "This education will open every door." I stayed quiet just like I had during the big reveal a few nights before when Kylie came home and tossed the acceptance letter in the air like confetti. My parents had gathered in the living room for that, drinks in hand, faces lit with joy, like it was a surprise party, except the surprise was that I was finally no longer the priority. She opened the envelope with the acceptance letter inside and burst out laughing, no freaking way like they'd handed her the moon. My dad wiped away a tear, yes, an actual tear, saying, "You've been trying so hard lately, honey. You deserve it." And my mom chimed in with that line I'll never forget. "Not if I live to be 100 and bitter. It's cheaper than some Ivy Leagues anyway, and at least she'll use the education. At least she'll use the education." Like, my education would be some museum exhibit collecting dust, while Kylie's private university degree was a goddamn business plan. It was that night, after they all went to bed with full bellies and empty heads, that I finally opened the email again. I needed to read it for the fourth time just to remind myself that the world outside this house still had eyes and that somebody somewhere thought I was worth something. "We are pleased to offer you full tuition, housing, and meals for the duration of your undergraduate studies." I did the math, $80,000 for college over 4 years is like $500 a month. Kylie's tuition alone was $68,000 per year. That's over $272,000 for 4 years. I sat there for a while after that at the edge of the couch with the glow of the laptop screen on my face, thinking maybe I was the crazy one. Maybe they really couldn't afford to help me and just found a good deal on the truck. Maybe they just panicked. Maybe. But then again, maybe not. When the sun started rising, I realized I hadn't slept, but it didn't matter. I already knew what I was going to do. I walked back upstairs, opened my closet, and started packing. Slowly. One hoodie at a time, one pair of jeans, one set of notebooks. Nothing flashy. Nothing they'd notice missing. I wasn't planning some grand escape. I didn't want them to panic or chase me down the driveway. I wanted it quiet. Just like they'd taught me. I stuffed the scholarship paperwork into the bottom of my backpack, folded my acceptance letter, and slid it between 2 books like a bookmark for a life I was about to start without them. I grabbed my duffel, tucked my pillow under my arm, and tiptoed down the stairs so gently it felt like a sin. The living room still smelled like popcorn and pride from Kylie's celebration the night before. There were beer bottles on the counter, her boots by the door, my dad's phone charging on the arm of the couch, like none of them had a single thought about me and where I fit into their little equation of success. Outside, the world felt different. Not freer, not lighter, just clearer. Like all the noise had drained out of my ears and left behind this cold, clean awareness of exactly what I was doing. I texted the rideshare driver, waited behind the bushes until the headlights rolled up, and slipped into the back seat like I was being exiled by choice. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just stared straight ahead as we pulled away, the tires rolling over gravel that had never once carried me toward anything that was mine. No one ran out yelling. No one noticed the silence upstairs. No one texted, not even hours later. Maybe they assumed I was out for a walk. Maybe they thought I was sulking. Maybe they just didn't care. I leaned my head against the window and thought, this is how I leave. No note. No goodbye. Just me, my stuff, and the soft sound of a house not bothering to wonder where I went. And that, somehow, felt more honest than anything they'd ever said to me. There is something strangely healing about being completely alone in a place where nobody knows your name, your story, your family, or your heartbreak. Because for the first time in your life, you get to decide who you are without anyone else's version of you hovering in the air like stale perfume. When I arrived at campus with 2 suitcases and a head full of determination, I didn't feel brave or liberated. I felt exhausted and numb. But underneath that numbness was something sharper, something like hunger. I wasn't there to make friends or reinvent myself into a glowing Instagram post. I was there to make sure I never had to depend on anyone who could look me in the eye and say, "We can't help you," while writing a $68,000 check for my sister's education without batting an eye. The first semester was hell, if I'm being honest. I didn't know anyone. I barely spoke unless called on. My roommate was nice enough but talked too much and didn't understand why I didn't want to party or go out on weekends. He said I was mysterious, which was just his way of saying I kept to myself and didn't bother explaining why I spent my nights holed up in the library or walking campus alone with headphones in and my jaw clenched like it was the only thing holding me together. I got a work-study job shelving books in the back of the science library, which suited me perfectly, quiet, orderly, and far away from people who asked too many questions. By the end of my first year, I had straight A's and a name on the dean's list. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. I printed the certificate and pinned it inside my closet where no one else would see it but me. It became a habit, that ritual of collecting little victories and hiding them away like stolen jewelry, honors, research credits, published lab reports. I took extra classes over the summers, became a teaching assistant, and got offered a grant to join a research group studying water contamination in rural communities, which felt strangely poetic considering I came from one of those quiet, poisoned places myself. Somewhere around year 2, I started writing again, not essays or reports, but poems scribbled in the margins of notebooks or typed in frantic bursts at 2 in the morning. I submitted a few under a pen name, thinking they'd be ignored, but one got picked up by a literary journal out of Chicago and then another by a small online magazine. I never used my real name. That way, if anyone ever stumbled across it, they wouldn't know it was me, the boy who left without a word and didn't send so much as a Christmas card, the boy who used to be their son. I thought about them less with every passing semester. At first, it was an act of will, something I forced myself to do, like pulling my hand away from a hot stove even though the instinct was to keep reaching. But over time, it stopped feeling like effort. Their voices faded. Their faces blurred. Even Kylie's smug grin as she posed for photos in her Westfield University sweatshirt became a shadow instead of a memory. I didn't block their numbers, I just never heard from them, and they never heard from me. That kind of silence becomes its own language after a while, one made of absence and unresolved tension that neither party is willing to break. Until the email. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, right as I was finishing a write-up for my senior research capstone. I was checking my university inbox for confirmation about graduation seating, just another mundane step in the long process of wrapping up 4 years of work, when I saw it. The subject line was simple, commencement guest list update. I clicked it without thinking, expecting a notice about ticket distribution or parking. What I got was a spreadsheet with RSVP confirmations from families. My eyes scanned the rows until they landed on a name I hadn't seen in years. Richard Whitaker. Lisa Whitaker. Kylie Whitaker. All 3 listed, all marked confirmed. I stared at the screen, rereading the names over and over like maybe they would disappear if I blinked hard enough. I leaned back in my chair, hands cold despite the spring sun glowing through the library windows, and suddenly I couldn't hear anything but the rush of blood in my ears. I hadn't told them about the ceremony. I hadn't told them where I was, what I was doing, what school I even attended. I hadn't posted photos. I hadn't sent invitations. I'd erased myself from their lives so cleanly I was almost proud of it. So how in the hell did they know? The rational part of me tried to walk it back. Maybe someone from our town saw my name on an honors list. Maybe the school published a spotlight feature and my dad, the Facebook sleuth he is, put 2 and 2 together. Maybe it wasn't even personal. Maybe they just wanted to show up and play the role of proud parents for the pictures. Or maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized what they lost the night I walked away without a goodbye. I closed the laptop, not ready to make a decision. I could still tell the office to pull their names. I could ask to have them removed, say there'd been a mistake. Or I could do nothing, let them come, let them sit there and see me walk across that stage without ever having been part of the journey that got me there. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay awake in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like to see their faces again after all this time, not as a son, not as the boy they forgot, but as something else entirely. Something they didn't recognize anymore. Something they didn't help build. The morning of my graduation came not with fanfare or balloons or those oversized cards full of gift money and half-hearted well wishes, but with a stomach twisted into something hard and cold and unmovable. Like, I'd swallowed a rock sometime during the night, and it had lodged itself just under my ribs. I got dressed in silence, the soft polyester of my graduation gown clinging awkwardly to the tank top underneath, my fingers fumbling over the zipper like they didn't want to cooperate with the moment either. I'd ironed the damn thing 3 times, convinced wrinkles would somehow give them something to critique if they saw me again, something they could latch onto instead of their own guilt. I hadn't responded to the email. I hadn't told the graduation office to pull their names. Some part of me wanted them to show up, wanted them to see me now, standing on my own without their hands propping me up. But, I didn't want contact, not really. Not the fake kind where everyone hugs and pretends nothing happened, where we play a round of emotional charades for the sake of appearances and everyone lies through their teeth until the car ride home. I just wanted them to see. That was all. I didn't think it would be any more complicated than that. The school gym had been converted into a makeshift arena for the commencement, rows and rows of folding chairs fanning out in neat lines like a military operation in honor of academic achievement, faculty in full regalia, students buzzing with nerves in photo ops, parents crowding the bleachers in carefully planned outfits, everyone pretending not to cry or puke or panic. I slipped through a side entrance and stayed close to the back wall, keeping my eyes on the clock, keeping my mind calm by running through the order of the program like it was a checklist for survival. At 9:30 sharp, my roommate from sophomore year, who I hadn't seen in months but still considered decent, found me near the bathroom hallway where I'd been hiding to avoid the crush of pre-ceremony selfies. His face was flushed, like he'd jogged across campus, and when he opened his mouth, his voice came out like a warning wrapped in hesitation. "Hey. So your dad is in the dean's office, crying loud." It didn't register for a second. I blinked at him like the sentence had come in the wrong language, and he had to repeat it slowly, as if I might be confused about the word dad. My legs moved before I could tell them not to. I followed him down the hallway, past student volunteers handing out programs, past a janitor double knotting a trash bag, past a group of guys adjusting their ties in a window reflection. And then I saw the door, glass front, wood frame, brass handle polished from years of use. Behind it, a familiar voice cracked through the air like a whip. "I just need to see him. Please. Just tell me where he is." He was standing at the counter, gripping a photo in both hands like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. My dad. Richard. Wearing a cream shirt and black slacks like he dressed up for a funeral instead of a celebration. His hair styled neatly like he still believed appearance was everything. His voice trembled in that way he used to when he wanted people to believe he was the one in pain. The receptionist looked deeply uncomfortable, flipping through paperwork while sneaking glances at the security camera, probably deciding whether this warranted calling someone from campus safety. And then his head snapped up. I don't know what gave me away. Maybe the rustle of the gown, maybe the weight of his own desperation finally tipping him into instinct, but his eyes locked on mine, and he gasped like he'd seen a ghost instead of his son. His hand went to his mouth, and the photo dropped to the counter with a flutter. "You're here," he whispered, like it was some kind of miracle. Behind him, my mom stood stiffly, arms crossed over her chest, looking everywhere but at me. Kylie leaned against the far wall, her phone glowing in her palm like she was texting someone about how boring this all was. None of them moved toward me. Not yet. It was as if there was an invisible line across the tile floor that they were afraid to cross, or maybe it was me who had drawn it so sharply over the years that they could feel the edges from where they stood. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, framed in the doorway, cap on my head, gown falling straight to my ankles, name card folded in my hand, and heart beating so loud I thought it might shatter the overhead lights. No one else in the hallway spoke. The receptionist looked down. My old roommate backed away like he didn't want to be part of whatever this was. My dad stepped forward. "Just one step. I've been trying to find you," he said, his voice cracking again. "For so long. I didn't know where you went. I didn't know how to reach you." I thought about all the ways he could have reached me if he'd wanted to. Through the school. Through extended family, through sheer effort. I thought about all the birthdays he let pass. The holidays, the silence. I thought about the red truck and the crying in the kitchen and the way he had looked so proud when Kylie got the keys to her future while I was left to fund mine with grit and borrowed time. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. Because I hadn't decided if I wanted closure or if I just wanted to walk away and let them live with the weight of not knowing who I had become. And so I stood there, silent and still, while my father begged a stranger for permission to be let back into a life he chose to walk out of years ago. And the only thing louder than his voice was the deafening question that hung between us all like smoke in a locked room. Would I answer? Or would I vanish again, this time forever? There was something almost theatrical about the way my dad turned toward me, like some part of him had rehearsed this exact moment in his head so many times that when it finally arrived, it didn't feel real, but instead like a scene he'd seen in a movie where the father gets to cry and the son forgives him because, after all, he's the father, and that's just how stories are supposed to end. But I wasn't in the mood to hand out easy endings, and I wasn't the same boy who'd quietly packed his bag 4 years ago while the rest of the house was too busy celebrating my sister's newest undeserved victory. He looked older. Not old exactly, but softened at the edges, like a paper you folded and unfolded so many times it doesn't snap back to its original shape. His outfit was neat, his watch small and tasteful, and his voice had that tremble that always used to work when he wanted something from me. Pity, obedience, forgiveness, take your pick. My mom stood behind him like she had no idea what to say, which felt fitting because she never really said anything when it counted anyway. Kylie, true to form, hadn't even looked up from her phone yet, probably playing a game or texting someone about how over it all she was. I didn't move. I just stood there, arms at my sides, cap tilted slightly forward, watching the three people who had once been my entire world try to navigate the sudden realization that I had become someone else entirely, someone they didn't know, someone they couldn't predict, someone they hadn't earned a right to anymore. My father took a step forward again, his voice still shaking but louder now, more performative, like he thought if he just said enough sad things with enough desperation in his voice, I'd come back like some obedient ghost summoned by grief. "We didn't know what else to do," he said, tears now forming, and I could already tell he was winding up for the speech. "Kylie was struggling, and your mother, she was out of work for a bit, and everything felt like it was falling apart, and then the scholarship didn't come for you, and," I stopped him with a look. Not loud. Not cruel. Just final. And maybe that was the most painful thing of all, that I didn't have to scream or accuse to show him just how far he'd fallen from me. "The scholarship did come," I said, voice steady, low enough that he had to step closer to hear me clearly. "You just didn't care enough to ask." That made him freeze, and for the first time since I'd walked into that office, I saw it, realization dawning like a slow burn. his mouth opening just slightly, as if he was trying to form a rebuttal but couldn't quite land on the words fast enough to undo 4 years of silence. My mom looked down at the floor, maybe ashamed, maybe just tired of trying to understand emotions she never bothered to deal with. Kylie sighed, finally raising her head, and with one look at me, she gave this half smile, like we were kids again and I was supposed to shrug this all off because that's just how it is in families, right? Here's the thing about trucks. They don't represent opportunity. They don't symbolize responsibility. They sure as hell don't replace love. A truck is a vehicle. A machine. Metal and rubber and glass. But the one Kylie got wasn't just a truck. It was a billboard of betrayal. A giant red middle finger to everything I'd worked for. And they all stood under that billboard and smiled while I sat upstairs, budgeting tuition in a notebook and wondering how many hours a week I could work before I collapsed. I took a step forward, just one, and I saw my father's face light up like maybe he thought this was it, the moment we hugged and cried and the credits rolled. But I didn't hug him. I didn't reach out. I just looked him in the eyes and said the words I'd been holding for 4 years, the words that had kept me warm on lonely nights and driven me forward when I wanted to quit. "You bought her a truck for her future," I said slowly, clearly, like I wanted him to feel every syllable. "I bought my own future with silence. Seems fair." He didn't cry harder. He didn't collapse. He just blinked. And for once in his life, he didn't have a reply. I walked out of that office without another word, the hem of my gown brushing against the tile, the tassel swinging slightly as I stepped into the hallway and let the buzz of other graduates and their families drown out the echo of my father's stunned silence behind me. The gymnasium was alive now, full of clapping and music and camera shutters clicking like locusts. I stayed near the edge, kept to myself, waited for my name to be called like I'd waited for everything in my life, with patience, quiet resolve, and a spine made of iron beneath my soft smile. When it was my turn, I walked the stage and didn't look at the crowd. I didn't skim the seats for familiar faces. I didn't care. I took my diploma, shook the dean's hand, smiled for the camera, and walked straight out the side door like I'd planned all along. No flowers. No hugs. No pretense. Outside, in the parking lot, the air smelled like cut grass and cheap cologne. People were laughing, crying, shouting names across rows of cars. I spotted it instantly, Kylie's designer outfit and freshly highlighted hair. Still polished, still expensive, still the symbol of everything I was supposed to swallow and smile through. She was standing off to the side, of course, taking up emotional space like she deserved more attention than the rest of us. Her designer purse dangled carelessly from her arm, her phone in her hand like an extension of herself. For a moment, just a second, I stood there staring at her, wondering how many times they'd paid her tuition while my empty room gathered dust, how many times Kylie had called home for extra money while they nodded and said of course, sweetie, like it was a damn charity. I walked toward her slowly just to see if the feeling would change. It didn't. I stopped a few feet away, looked at her expensive shoes, at the designer label barely visible on her jacket, at the class ring from Westfield that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and I laughed, just once, low and bitter. Because the truth is, some things are bought. Her future was bought. My silence was earned. And mine was the only one that ever cost anything real. I turned around. Didn't acknowledge her. Didn't leave a message. Just kept walking. Because what they never understood is that sometimes the real revenge isn't fire and fury. It's becoming someone they can never reach again. I walked across campus one last time, passing the library where I'd spent countless nights, the lab where I'd discovered my passion for research, the coffee shop where I'd written my first paper that got published in a peer-reviewed journal. Each place held memories of a life I'd built without them, brick by brick, night after sleepless night. I'd become someone new here, someone stronger, clearer, more defined than the quiet son they'd dismissed so easily. 2 blocks from campus, I reached the small apartment I'd rented for my final semester. It wasn't much, just a studio with a kitchenette and a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. Paid for with my own money from the research stipend I'd earned. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and finally let my shoulders drop. My new offer wasn't just a job, it was a PhD fellowship at an institute in Switzerland, complete with stipend, housing allowance, and research budget. It was the kind of opportunity that made even my scholarship look small, the culmination of 4 years of relentless work while Kylie had been posting party photos from her expensive private university education that our parents had happily funded. I'd be moving across an ocean, putting even more distance between myself and the family that had once decided I wasn't worth investing in. Independent. That was the word that mattered. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, assuming it was my roommate asking about the after-graduation party. But it buzzed again, insistent, so I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Dad. 3 text messages in a row. Please talk to us. We made a terrible mistake. We want to make it right. I set the phone down without replying. 4 years too late. 4 years of silence that could have been filled with calls, with questions, with genuine interest in the life I was building. But they'd waited until I had something they wanted, the successful son, the graduate, the achievement they could claim, before deciding I was worth pursuing. Another buzz. Mom, this time. Your father is devastated. Please. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching graduates and families stream from campus toward celebration dinners and parties. There was a time when I thought I'd feel victorious in this moment, when I imagined their regret would taste sweet. Instead, I just felt hollow. Not sad, not angry, just empty of any need for their validation. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email I'd drafted the night before, addressed to the fellowship committee. I am pleased to accept your offer. My finger hovered over the send button. This would take me across an ocean, even further from the possibility of reconciliation. But reconciliation required something I wasn't sure existed anymore: trust. And trust, once shattered, doesn't mend with a few desperate texts and tears in a dean's office. I hit send and closed the laptop. Whatever came next, whether I eventually allowed them back into my life in some limited capacity, or whether this clean break became permanent, would be entirely on my terms. The power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore, begging for scraps of attention at the family table. I was a man with options, with a future brighter than the chrome on Kylie's truck. My phone buzzed again. A text from my research mentor: proud of you today. Celebratory dinner at Marco's at 7? I typed back a quick "I'll be there" and stood up, removing my graduation gown and hanging it neatly in the closet. I wouldn't need it again, but I'd keep it, not as a reminder of my parents sitting somewhere in that gymnasium, but as a marker of a promise I'd made to myself and kept. As I changed into dinner clothes, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different than the boy who'd slipped away in a rideshare 4 years ago, older, certainly, but also steadier. More present in my own skin. I straightened my collar and smiled at myself, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "You did good, kid," I whispered to my reflection. "You did good." And for the first time in a very long time, those were the only words of approval I needed.